You know, that mine was going from before the turn of the century. This is the oldest head frame on the hill, and I think it was moved from someplace else. They would
1890?
Yeah, probably, yeah. But they would move these around, the head frames, because they're pretty expensive things, so they'd tear them down and reassemble them over the next mine they wanted to do. But this is the oldest head frame on the hill, and I don't know, I'm assuming maybe this dump is from the diamond. This waste rock, it costs money to move rock, and so you don't move it any farther than you have to. So you're on the side of a hill, you just start dumping it out, and then you run railroad tracks along the top of it, and you just keep dumping off the end. So around every one of these there would be these waste dumps sticking out into the side of the off the side of the hill.
Mm-hmm. And we at class, we talked about healthy and disturbed ecosystems, and you know, we talked about that graph where we really need to do some action so that area should recover. This has been standing here for, let's say, 100 years, and nothing actually grows on it. Nothing happens, nothing grows. It's so seriously damaged that you can't really I mean, we should do something to actually move it away, but we are not doing anything, because Joe probably will be talking about the, what is that term when it's not worth anything because it will just cost so much money?
Oh, technical impracticability.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good term. Yeah, you know, nothing grows on it because it's just like Robert measured that puddle, so you can imagine any kind of soil moisture that plants would need is going to be a pH of one something or two something.
No plants really like that.
And yeah, that's pretty tough even for acid-loving plants.
Still existing on that, but
Does anybody see the deer?
a fox?
Last time I was here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's foxes in here, and
So why is there a sign up here?
For people to read.
well, same reason there's a pathway in here. Just
Are they trying to make it open?
no, this is as open as it'll ever be. It's by
Only Joe and I can take you in here, and they build it for us.
yeah.
Tours.
They always say, "Do it," and they do it. It's great. There you can hear the whalers, and you'll hear some booms every so often. Those are the bird mitigation noises. I bet they're kind of on alert right now with this weather that's moved in.
Cool. With my camera,
there's
wouldn't
one
that be
of the
awesome
booms.
if there will be like 10,000 geese like landing right now?
Yeah,
I could sell that video.
Yeah, we
So
could get. Should we wait here, Robert,
Yeah,
until they come?
I think.
Build it and they will come. So this is an active mine. Beyond the Berkeley pit, you can see the high wall of the Continental pit. Beyond the high wall is the Continental Divide. That's the East Ridge, which we can't see now. We are here at the very headwaters of the Columbia River. This is the easternmost, it just turns out it really is the easternmost headwaters of the Columbia River. So the current mine, well, do you see any trucks running right now? I think yeah, there's the bird whaler.
Yeah, but they're in operation 24/7.
They are, but
there's
I think on Saturdays they might shut down for maintenance and stuff.
Okay.
I can't remember, but usually you see trucks running. I don't see a single haul truck. Over here, this set of buildings and the three big clarifiers, that's the concentrator. It starts, you can see there's the road comes out of the mine, or it goes around. Oh, there's a haul truck right there. So way off to, can you guys see it?
Yeah, in that bend.
Yep,
Just
in that
coming out the
bend.
curve.
So he's just dumped his load of ore into the primary crushers. So that first set of buildings, most to the right, is primary crusher. It goes along some conveyors. It goes to a secondary crusher. Then it goes into those big buildings there. There's mills in there, so they mix the crushed ore with water and it goes into a rod mill first. It's a big tumbler with steel rods in it, just mashes it up. Goes to a ball mill to make it even finer. Goes to flotation cells, which are big tanks. They have some unique chemistry to the fluids in there. They have agitators and it forms a froth on the surface. The froth picks up very particular surface chemistry or surface charges. So the metals you want stick to it. Actually, pyrite falls to the bottom of the tank, as does most of the quartz and feldspars. That mixture of quartz and feldspars and pyrite are called tailings. So it's a tail end of this concentrating process. That's pumped uphill to the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment, and I do have a picture here of that. We'll look at that in a second.
So as I understand, in that process they add diesel and lime into the process for that chemical reaction to
Right.
and air through it, so that
Right.
they float basically the metals they want on top.
And that fluid is at a pH of 11 or 11 and a half. So copper will stay in a solid form at that high pH. As a matter of fact, if you want to take copper out of water, you raise the pH up to about 10 and a half, and you'll take the copper out of water. It stays dissolved at low pH. So if you start at 2.5 and you dissolve the copper and you bring it up to 7, it'll still be in solution. So you can measure elevated copper levels in Silverbow Creek, and it's at a pH of 7, but it's somewhere it started out at low pH. There's a treatment plant and they use lime to raise the pH up. So
There has been 25 billion tons of copper that was actually taken out of this area.
right,
And they say it's only
not tons, pounds.
pounds.
23 billion pounds of copper produced, and I don't know when they did that calculation, but it's still, and counting, I guess.
And there is still 2/3 in there, they say. Only
Yep.
1/3 was taken out so
Yeah,
far.
so the original ore body, there's still 2/3 of it left of the copper. Anyways, so this is, here we are at the diamond. This is the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment, which they are just now going to public comment. They're trying to permit raising the dam. I don't remember how many more feet, but if they can't get that permitted, the mine closes. So I'm pretty sure it'll get permitted. The state of Montana and the city of Butte and the mine, of course, and Denny Washington, who owns the mine, certainly want to keep mining. They pay a lot of taxes in this town. They pay a Hard Rock trust fund. And so anyways, this tailings impoundment is about 2 square miles. The Berkeley pit's a little over a square mile. Here's the current mine. Here's where Silverbow Creek used to run. So it ran across the far side of the lake portion of this. That's all I need to point out, really. If you look down here, if you look below us, we're looking at bedrock. But if you look across, you notice how it looks like it's unconsolidated material. That's because that's Silverbow Creek alluvium. So at one time, the Silverbow Creek channel was deeper than what we can see there. Where?
Right on the edge of the.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow, he's got the grand view.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. I was wondering if we were gonna say. I don't know if I've ever been up here without seeing deer. So.
These are the ladies.
Yep. No antlers.
So
Somebody's already poached the big bucks, I bet.
probably.
They've gotten poached before. Well, they wander out of the mine, and then I think they've gotten poached. One of them died in front of the federal courthouse, and then they caught the guy who poached it. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, if you look back this way and you see this stair step of orange and gray rock, that's all waste rock, and that's the face of the Yankee Doodle Tailings Dam. So from the base to the top of that is about 700 feet. Pretty high dam. I think it's
One of the highest things.
it's one of the highest. I think it's the highest tailings dam.
Yeah.
In permitting the next rise of that, one of the things they had to do was an evaluation of seismic stability. They have calculated, I think it was 6.8. So you have to come up with what's the biggest earthquake we might expect off a fault. So there's a fault that runs through the continental pit. It's called the Continental Fault, strangely enough. And nobody knows when it last moved. I know there are people at Tech that would like to be able to evaluate it more. It's really hard to figure that out. A lot of work's been done on dating movement on faults, mostly in California on the San Andreas system. And they can do it by seeing different layers that are disrupted and then finding something they can date, and they can see how things have been displaced. So you find old surfaces, and it might be hard on this one. Anyway, so they have to come up with some way of coming up with a maximum probable earthquake. So 6.8, and then they did an evaluation of the stability of the dam for 6.8, and I forget the firm. They're out of Berkeley, California, so someplace where they do study earthquakes a lot and have a lot of experience. I don't know. It's a reasonable study. And I've kind of glanced through it. The important part for me, the interesting part for me was the cross sections through the dam. So they've done borings and they know how it's built. Dams can be built, they're called upstream or downstream or centered. So, you know, it's not like you build a dam and then fill it like a normal dam. You're kind of building it up as you go. And so, one way they do that is they can keep building it out going downstream, or they can build it going upstream, and both of those have been shown to be kind of unstable. Most of this has been centered, so it just keeps building up on top of a centered piece of it. There's one small section that has been built in an upstream manner. But one of the things about this dam is all of that waste rock, those terraces over there are waste rock. Those are additional buttresses to both sides of the dam.
I think we should also talk about there's 80 billion gallons of water. How is it filling up? And then what is the plan? That's something if...
Oh yeah. Better get to that. Here. So what is the plan for this and technical impracticability? So I think there's like 40 billion gallons in the Berkeley, but there's probably an additional 40 billion in the 10,000 miles of underground workings, which includes that 10,000 miles does not include stoping, which is where they've hollowed out these entire huge veins. So those are still big cavities underground. So EPA, so they turned off the pumps that used to dewater the mines in 1982. Atlantic Richfield decided they were done with mining, turned off the pumps. So water level started flooding back in. If you measured the water level all around here in shafts or wells, you would have seen that it all sloped down to wherever they were pumping. But when they turned off the pumps, it ended up being the Berkeley pit as the lowest point, because it is like a well. It's a huge, vast, open space. So right now, everywhere around here, and they measure this monthly, they measure the water levels all around here. It all slopes down to the Berkeley pit. So this is now like a big capture well. So enter EPA, and they start saying, what the hell are we going to do with this? And they did something called a technical impracticability evaluation. And I like to think of it as a practicability evaluation. In other words, what can you do? But anyways, it starts out with, they thought, we're going to, what happens if we took out all of the acid producing ore body here? In other words, that's mined, so it has access to oxygen and water. And so they would have removed the rest of the ore body. They would end up with a Berkeley pit that was about 6 times bigger than this, and it would have cost about $60 billion. And they went, that's absurd. We're not doing that. We can't force ARCO to do that, and it's absurd. They looked at drilling holes on 100-foot centers down to the bottom of the working, so going almost a mile deep. And they would have injected either lime to neutralize everything, or they would have injected grout to just fill it back up. And that was between $9 and $13 billion, and it's basically back of the envelope calculations that nobody had much confidence would work either. So they said, can't do that. So EPA has to say they can protect human health and the environment. Human health's pretty easy. This groundwater is poisonous, there's no doubt about it, but they can just say, we will never allow anybody to access this water as a drinking water source. Pretty easy to do that. But what about the environment? If this just keeps rising, eventually it will go spill off into the water table, and it'll pop out somewhere in the Silver Bow Creek drainage. So they said, well, we can't let that happen. We will, before this reaches a level where it would do that, we will start pumping it and just hold it at a safe level so that it's always the lowest point in this mine flooding system. And then we'll have to treat that water, and that water will have to meet all of state of Montana's water quality standards before it's discharged downstream. That's the story about technical impracticability. In this case, it will probably have to go on for a very long time. Like, I'm thinking geologic time. Nobody knows, and like I said, the pH just came up about 1.5 years ago to 4. That was a kind of a major step. My friend Nick Tucci, I'm a pretty crappy chemist, but if any of you take geochemistry from Chris Gammons, you might ask him this question. It used to be that the pH was buffered by the iron, and then I don't know what happened to the iron, why it came out, but once it did, the pH came up to about 4, and that's now being buffered by aluminum. So I don't know if anything will happen to the aluminum, but you kind of started this huge geochemical engine starting up because of introducing water and oxygen to 10,000 miles of underground workings. And you could model the hell out of it, and you're not going to have much of an answer. It'd be somewhere, you probably come up with somewhere between 100 years and 2 million years if you're going to be honest about your modeling. you can always use a model to come up with an answer that's 273 years and 6 months, but it's a bullshit model, right? So
And that is called a wet closure that they do right now, right?
it's called a wet closure. That was the other thing they looked at in the TI is should we start pumping now or should we let it rise? And that was part of the decision there, was to let it rise so you're shutting off oxygen to most of the underground workings. And when you measure pH in the underground, it's more like 4.5 or 5. So it does shut off, it does shut off the acid production somewhat.
So there is 7 million gallons that they would need to treat every day. That's how much. What happened?
Hi. Yeah, I'm good.
Are you good?
Yep. I just dropped it. Thank you.
You can sit down there. Are you sure?
Yep, I'm good.
Oh yeah, Whaler's going. So actually I should say, does anybody have any questions?
Yep. Questions, guys?
Yeah, pumping the water out of the mine, like if we pull it out of the mine shafts, how unstable is Uptown View?
You know, it's
Because I imagine the water has all the pressure and it keeps.
you're exactly right on that, but most of the mine workings in the 10,000 miles are fairly deep. So even if they collapse down there, it doesn't reach the surface. There was actually, at the same time they were starting the Berkeley pit, they started another program. It was all under something called the Greater Butte Project, and they were looking at, what is that called? Block caving. And for block caving, they're still working in the underground. They built the big Kelly head frame right there. Notice it's a lot stouter. They had bigger shafts and bigger ore cars. That was built for block caving, and you go underground, you undermine an area about the size of a city block, and you have to have grizzlies there, and then you have chutes underneath, and you start pulling out the ore, and the whole thing starts collapsing. Good thing the wind's not blowing. And some of those actually came all the way up to the surface. I don't know where they were, but I thought I had seen some spots from early air photos, but it turned out that having to haul up a shaft and still working underground was nowhere as good as working on the surface and having huge shovels and huge trucks to move ore around, low grade ore. So all of that occurred because the rich veins had played out and they had to go switch to low grade ore.
Some more interesting stuff from underground mining. 100 years ago, last year, we had Pat Cunneen, and he mentioned that there were...
We better start going out. It's like 10 to 10.
There were around 12,000 people working underground that era, around 100 years ago. That was a lot of jobs, just underground. And basically, today at MR, there is around 350 people working,
350,
so
I think.
significantly less people. They're still hauling a lot of dirt. It's a different kind of mining today. It's more efficient and everything, but it's basically big trucks doing the job instead of the people. So that actually changed the economy pretty much over here. Yeah, and slowly we should move out because it's getting closer to then. Are you good, Cindy?
Yeah.